In today's story, we'll hear the eerie tale of a couple who went out of the city to spend their honeymoon at an old, mysterious place. It was a cruelly cold December night. The weather was freezing. The tall bamboo and pine trees swayed restlessly in the strong wind, making a haunting, rustling sound. Maha, dressed in a bright orange outfit, sat beside Ashar in the driving seat. Ashar was driving the car slowly along the roadside, as casually as if he were taking a walk. They were on their way to spend their honeymoon at a peaceful resort called the Bride Star Hotel. It had been 2 hours since they left home, but the hotel was still another hour away. As the night deepened, the cold grew sharper. The whistling of the fierce wind could be heard even through the closed windows of the car. "You're not getting bored, are you?" Ashar asked softly, glancing at Maha with warmth in his eyes. The tenderness in his voice made her heart flutter. Her eyes felt heavy with sleep. She shook her head and turned again to gaze outside at the fog-covered road. Suddenly, Ashar hit the brakes hard. Maha was startled and looked at him questioningly. "Looks like something's wrong." "Just a minute, I'll check." He got out of the car and opened the bonnet to inspect the engine. Once he stepped out, Maha went back to staring out the window. But then she suddenly felt the warmth of someone's hands on her shoulders. She turned around quickly. No one was there. Her heart skipped a beat. Trying to calm herself, she grabbed a warm blanket from the back seat and stepped out of the car. She looked around for a moment, then glanced toward the front where Ashar was supposed to be checking the engine. But he was gone. On that deserted road, surrounded by towering bamboo and pine trees, Maha was now all alone. "Ashar! Ashar!" she called out again and again, but the raging wind carried her voice away before it could reach him. Just then, the chilling cry of an owl echoed through the forest, sending a shiver down her spine. Despite the freezing December air, beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. She could hear the sound of footsteps approaching. Maha's heart began to race. Maybe it was Ashar. Yes. Maha began to follow the sound of those footsteps. "Ashar, is that you?" she called out, her voice trembling with fear. The footsteps grew softer and then stopped completely. Without realizing it, Maha had wandered far from a car. When she turned back, the car was nowhere to be seen, swallowed by the thick fog. She tried to convince herself she would find her way back, but even after walking for 10 minutes in the same direction, she could see nothing but fog. The only things that followed her were the sounds of wild animals echoing through the dark forest. The beauty of the woods slowly turned into something sinister. The leaves began to fall rapidly from the trees, as if autumn had suddenly descended upon them. The eerie cries of owls echoed once more. The blanket slipped from Maha's shoulders. They were drenched in sweat despite the biting cold. She bent down to pick it up, but the blanket slid forward on its own, as if someone were pulling it away. Startled, she reached again, but it was pulled further ahead. Her heart pounded violently. She placed her trembling hand over her chest, trying to calm down. Gathering a bit of courage, she stepped forward, but it felt like she had stepped into a cruel game of cat and mouse. The blanket kept slipping farther, leading her deeper into the forest. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind struck her face like a slap. She gasped. The blanket had vanished. Her breathing grew heavy and uneven. Fear completely engulfed her. A cold shiver ran through her entire body. Her voice felt trapped in her throat, as if someone had sealed her mouth shut. She wanted to move, but her legs refused to obey. Then, out of the mist, a shadow appeared. It looked like Ashar's, but it vanished just as quickly. Maha tried to call his name, but her voice stuck in her throat. Tears of terror streamed down her face. A creeping vine slithered across the ground and wrapped tightly around her ankles. Within seconds, her feet began to swell painfully. She tried to move, but her legs sank into the soft earth. A black cat passed right beside her. Its glowing eyes pierced through the fog, fixed directly on her. The cat hissed and struck at her face with its claws. Overwhelmed with horror and pain, Maha collapsed, unconscious. When Maha opened her eyes, she found herself in a room. A soft quilt was wrapped around her body. The darkness of the night had vanished. and sunlight streamed gently through the curtains. The memories of the previous night flashed before her eyes. She quickly sat up. Ashar was lying beside her, fast asleep. His face looked calm and peaceful. The blanket covered him up to his chest, and his bare arms rested on top of it. Seeing that serene expression, Maha forgot everything for a moment. She leaned forward and kissed his forehead, then went to the bathroom to freshen up. When she returned, Ashar was awake. Wearing his shirt, he sat against the headboard, staring blankly at the ceiling. "Good morning," Maha said cheerfully, drying her wet hair with a towel. He smiled faintly in reply, but soon drifted back into deep thought. Maha switched on the hairdryer and began drying her hair. Just then, there was a knock at the door. A waiter stood outside with a tray carrying 2 cups of coffee. As Ashar stepped aside, the waiter entered, placed the tray on the table, smiled politely, and left. Ashar lowered his gaze, avoiding eye contact. When Maha asked the reason, he explained, "You fell asleep in the car last night. When we reached the hotel, I tried to wake you up, but you wouldn't move at all. I had to carry you inside, right through the lobby, in front of the whole staff." The hair dryer slipped from Maha's hands. "I fell asleep in the car? But I came out of the car behind you, Ashar." "What are you talking about?" he said, confused. "I stopped the car only after we reached the hotel." "No, I'm talking about when the car broke down," Maha insisted. Ashar frowned slightly. "The car broke down? Maha, you must have been dreaming. Maybe you fell asleep and imagined it all." He laughed softly, picked up his coffee cup, and got back under the blanket. But how could that be a dream? Maha's heart raced as she whispered to herself, "The fog, the forest, the owl's cries, the vine that wrapped around my feet, the black cat that clawed my face." She ran her hand over her cheek in panic. There were no marks. That night, the two of them had dinner again outside in the lawn, under the soft glow of candlelight. They had planned to have dinner together that night. Ashar left the room around 6 o'clock to make all the arrangements and set up the lawn. Before leaving, he told Maha to come down by 7. After he left, Maha went into the bathroom. While taking a shower, she suddenly heard footsteps in the room. Her heart skipped a beat. For a moment, she felt uneasy, but then reassured herself, thinking maybe Ashar had come back to pick up something he'd forgotten. When she came out, she noticed a box placed neatly on the bed. Smiling, she assumed it was a gift from Ashar and began to open it. Inside was a stunning red dress adorned with silver pearls that shimmered beautifully under the light. Her face lit up with joy. It was her first gift from Ashar after their wedding night. She decided to wear that very dress to dinner. By 7 o'clock, she was all dressed up, glowing, graceful, and radiant. When she stepped into the lawn, it was breathtaking. Lush greenery stretched all around. The cool night breeze made the weather feel even more romantic. At the center of the lawn stood a table decorated with bright red and white roses. Soft music floated in the air, adding magic to the moment. Maha blushed, her cheeks turning crimson. With a slow, elegant walk, she moved toward the table. Suddenly, someone wrapped their arms around her from behind. Warm breaths brushed against her neck, sending shivers down her spine. The scent of jasmine filled the air, intoxicating and sweet. "Ashar, someone might see us. Please let go," she whispered shyly. Her face brushed against his cheek. She closed her eyes, lost in the warmth of that embrace. But then, something wet touched her face. She opened her eyes slightly, confused, and ran her fingers across her cheek. Her heart froze. It was blood. Terrified, she turned around and screamed. Before her stood a man, drenched in blood from head to toe. Maha covered her eyes with her trembling hands and screamed again. "Maha, what happened? Why did you scream?" Ashar's voice broke through her panic. His hands gripped her shoulders firmly. She opened her eyes slowly, trembling, and looked up at him. His face was clean, glowing, and calm. There was no blood. Shaking, she looked down at her own hands. When she looked at her hands, they were spotless. The blood had completely vanished. "You look absolutely stunning in that dress," Ashar said with a soft smile, trying to ease the fear on her face. "It suits you perfectly." Maha tried to steady her breathing, convincing herself it must have been her imagination. "Of course, the gift you give me would be beautiful," she said playfully, trying to lighten the mood. "Gift? But I haven't given you any gift yet," Ashar replied with a puzzled look, shrugging his shoulders. He pulled out a chair for her, helped her sit down, and then sat across from her. Maha froze. "If you didn't give it to me, then who did, Ashar?" Ashar looked confused. He didn't understand what she was talking about. For the next half hour, they both sat there in silence, lost in each other's gaze, surrounded by the soft night breeze. Yet between them, there seemed to be a third presence, unseen but quietly watching. Ashar didn't notice anything, but Maha could feel it. The place felt strange, mysterious. She didn't mention it, afraid to sound foolish. Later that night, the wind grew stronger. It blew open the closed window, and the sharp gusts filled the room with a whistling sound. Everything was calm, except Maha. She lay in bed wearing her nightdress, but her face showed clear signs of unease. She kept tossing and turning, as though running from something in her dreams. Then suddenly, she sat up, gasping, "Ashar, Ashar, Ashar." Her whole body was drenched in sweat. Her face looked pale and terrified. She took long, trembling breaths, trying to make sense of where she was. When she realized she was still in the room, she sighed in relief and reached out her right hand toward the bed, but it was empty. Confused, she switched on the lamp. The bed beside her was vacant. Panic set in. She quickly got up and checked the bathroom. Ashar wasn't there either. Then she remembered the dream she had just seen, and her heart started pounding even faster. The shadow of fear once again surrounded her. A cold gust of air struck her face like a slap. Her eyes darted toward the window. It was wide open, even though she clearly remembered closing it before going to sleep. She walked toward it slowly and looked outside. The thick fog had swallowed everything. But then, a shadow was free, one that could clearly be seen even in the darkness. She ran downstairs and, thinking it was Ashar, began chasing it. The intensity of the weather kept increasing. Outside, the fog had turned into fine drops. The trees had started releasing an artificial kind of rain. The shadow was slowly disappearing, but Ma kept following it. Suddenly, a scream echoed, and the shadow vanished. She froze. Fear was clearly visible in her eyes. She tried to call for help, but her voice got stuck in her throat. She turned to go back to the hotel, but the path had turned deserted. Darkness surrounded her completely. The path she had come from was now covered in thorns. When she looked down at her feet, they were bleeding. Blood was dripping, yet she felt no pain. Fear had surrounded her from all sides. Suddenly, a black cat appeared again, and once more, it leapt at Ma's face with its claws. Unable to bear the attack, she fainted. "Please, let's go home. I don't want to stay here anymore," she cried like a child, begging Ashar, who was busy bandaging her feet. "But why?" Ashar asked, confused. Finally, gathering courage, Ma told him everything. But Ashar dismissed it as her imagination. Reading horror stories had always been Ma's obsession. He thought she had let one of those stories take over her mind so completely that she was now believing it to be true. Still, he comforted her, saying, "As soon as your feet heal, we'll leave this place." Saying this, he stepped out of the room and took out a folded slip from his jeans. It was the doctor's prescription with a few medicines written on it. After glancing at it briefly, he put it back into his pocket and walked out of the hotel. The medical store was a bit far, and cars couldn't go that way, so he decided to go on foot. To save time, he took the shortcut through the forest. All of Ma's words kept circling in his mind. While walking, his eyes suddenly caught sight of a cloth draped around a tree. It was the same cloth Ma had seen that night in the forest. She had left it there. He stepped closer and pulled the cloth down. It was indeed Ma's shawl. A look of seriousness formed on his face. But still, he couldn't fully believe that what Ma had told him was actually true. Shaking his head to dismiss the thought, he went to the medical store, bought the medicine, and returned to the hotel. The moment he entered the room, the ground slipped from beneath his feet. Blood was dripping from Ma's body, which hung from the ceiling fan. The medicine slipped from his hand, and his breath caught in his chest. Shock struck him so hard that he collapsed on the floor, unconscious. When he opened his eyes, Ma was sitting beside his bed, staring at him without blinking. He couldn't tell whether it was fear or reality. Ma was alive, sitting right in front of him. Then whose body had he seen hanging? You were right, Ma. There's something here. We have to get out of this place immediately, he said, jumping to his feet and moving toward the wardrobe. But Ma held his hand. You're right, Ishar. There is someone here, but what's the hurry to leave? A deep male voice came from behind. Ishar turned around and saw a half-shadowed figure that looked somewhat like Ma, but it wasn't her. Someone else was wearing Ma's form. Ishar's eyes widened in disbelief. He was frozen, unable to speak. His hand was still in the grip of that figure. He tried with all his strength to break free, but it was useless. His heartbeat began to slow, and the figure stood up, then plunged a knife deep into Ishar's chest. In the next moment, Ishar collapsed to the ground. His breath was gone, and the figure had disappeared. The knife, too, was nowhere to be found. The beautiful hotel room suddenly fell into ruin. Daylight turned to darkness. The wardrobe burst open with a loud crack, and Ma's lifeless body fell to the floor. The entire glow of the hotel turned to dust and bones. The lovely lawn outside transformed into a barren jungle. It was as if the hotel had never existed at all. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check important info.